Good evening. I'm joined today by Rupert Lowe. After the CPS confirmed yesterday there'll be no charges brought against him after the alleged threats that were made, you remember, back in March. But crucially, this was because Malcolm McAfee, head of the Special Crime Division at the CPS, said that whilst they'd looked through a lot of detailed evidence, including several witness statements, they said there was insufficient evidence to proceed. So, Rupert, many people have shown you support. I'm sure you know that by now, including me. So, first of all, welcome back to the channel and congratulations. You must be quite relieved.
Well, I am relieved. I mean, do you know what? I didn't pay it that much attention because I knew I hadn't done anything that I should not be proud of. So I think the whole thing's been an experience, and I think it's quite extraordinary. It's taken as long as it has to get to where we are or where we did yesterday. I just question, and look, I'm really grateful to everybody who supported me, and there's been a lot of people who have. And most of the people in Parliament, I think, could see it was a blundered sort of attempt at political assassination. So, whereas I think if people think you genuinely behave badly, they probably treat you with a degree of caution. I haven't found that, and if anything, people have been very kind, and they have stuck with it throughout this what I call lawfare process, which I don't think has been entirely well handled. So I question how many other people have been the subject, and you may know the answer to this, of this kind of miscarriage of process. In my case, my name was leaked before I was even told that an investigation was happening. The fact that the file was handed to CPS was made public, which it shouldn't have been. And having read the manuals really and looked at case law, I think I'm right in saying the duty of the police is to ensure that the investigation is kept confidential, and if the decision is not to charge, that should also have been confidential. So in the end, innocent people are not in any way prejudiced. Now, in my case, with a high-profile career in Parliament, it's not good policy to be discussing these things publicly unless I'd been charged, in which case it's understandable that it should be. But that wasn't the way it happened. So I don't know, I don't think that seems to be right to me. I think the length of the process has been too long. I think there seems to be no accountability, as indeed there never seems to be with the state. So whether it's HMRC using its unlimited covenant to sort of crush the smaller taxpayer, or whether it's the police stroke CPS abusing their position, I think the state has become a malign oppressor of the individual, which is something we probably all need to discuss and address.
But it's certainly been a criticism of mine and many people that have spoken to me about the legal system, in that a lot of it seems unfair. A lot of it seems like other people have made decisions before they even get to court or anything else. And a lot of this process along the way seems unfair and takes too long. One of my main criticisms is that the whole process, be it crime, be it family, civil, or whatever, that it takes too long and there's too much. And I always feel that there should be somebody that steps in far earlier to shut these things down far earlier. And as you say, very often names and details are leaked or just published where they really shouldn't be. There was that police officer's name who was published who really shouldn't have been. So there's a lot of examples like that. So you're certainly not the only one. But this must have dragged your staff into it as well. I see that there were several witness statements. Presumably they came to your staff to speak to them, and surely whether you are the direct subject of an investigation or not, surely they would have been under some sort of stress as well.
Well, my staff have been very long-headed about it, and I think they know it's nonsense. Look, I run multiple businesses, Daniel. I basically employ lots of people, and at the end of the day, I've never had an issue like this before, and I think people's track record usually speaks volumes about them. So I think they knew me, and indeed most of them were very supportive because they've worked with me closely and they've never seen me. I mean, this early onset dementia was just simply vile to sort of spread that one. The bullying.
That was terrible.
Bullying in the office. It's all part of this political assassination attempt. That was vile.
I think I said in one of my videos that even if that were true, it was still vile. It was the sort of thing that nobody should ever bring up. Like I say,
If
even
somebody
if it
did
were,
have early onset dementia, the last thing one should do is publicize that fact and accuse them of having it. So it's, and there are lots of people suffering from it. It's an extremely unfortunate problem to have. And God forbid that, anybody unnecessarily suffers from it. But it all played to the same script. I think Nigel said my temper had changed and become shorter since he'd known me in the European Parliament. I was supposed to be, potentially bullying staff, which is drivel. I had early onset dementia. I think one of the statements suggested I was going around Parliament saying I was a good shot and I was going to shoot Zia Yusuf. So that probably explains the gun situation. But I mean, frankly, most of it was just amateur and unbelievable and rubbish. So, and again, I'm amazed that under the legal system, people who make these statements that clearly don't hold any water, and on which it's difficult to prosecute anybody, because all of these conversations were subjective. They were he said, she said. The WhatsApp chains didn't support what had been said. The length of time between the date on which they didn't even remember the date that it had happened, and the time it was reported fitted in with the Daily Mail interview. I mean, look, the whole thing could be pieced together and put down to a political assassination attempt, which has now failed. One interviewer today said to me, "So you look pretty chipper considering you've just been through all this." I said, "Look, I've been through a lot worse than this. I've had my phones hacked. I've fought 2 libel trials. I've always tended to sort of get involved in these scraps. And had I been charged, I would have dealt with that, and I would have eviscerated that because it never happened. But I really don't like this lawfare. I don't like the state being able to, as you say, over a long period of time, damage people's lives, put them under suspicion, potentially damage their businesses, damage their family relationships. And I can tell you, 4 armed police in 3 cars, each with 2 guns, body armor, and cameras, turning up at 9:30 at night is a fairly hair-raising experience for one's wife. And for about sort of 5 hours, I thought this is pretty unfair, given that I hadn't done anything. But as you know, if you show any form of sort of loss of cool, or indeed challenge, unreasonable challenge, then that counts against you, and you find it more difficult to get your guns back. So again, I don't like this statism. And, the fact that Reform used this lawfare against me, when I think we all used to talk about how important it was that we reversed that. So I think they've used against me what we publicly said that we didn't approve of. And that in itself is hypocritical. So there's all sorts of things that were wrong here. Has it affected me? No, not really. But it's irritated me. And it's made me, am I going to leave the battlefield? Definitely not. It's made me want to redouble my efforts to try and find a solution to putting in place a structure which is going to deliver for the British people. As I said to Nigel and my colleagues in Reform, winning the election is only half the equation. What we have to do is not only win it, we then have to have a plan, some policies, a structure, a shadow cabinet, and be able to explain to people how we're going to reverse a lot of the malign legislation, and produce better policies that are going to liberate the individual, reduce the influence of the state, and allow people to enjoy free speech, to enjoy unfettered risk-taking, to enjoy all the things that they enjoy without being licensed, regulated, and taxed out of existence.
Yeah, there's a lot of things there, and I'll take one or two of them in turn, if I may, with the short time that we have. But first of all, probably in reverse order that they came into me in my head, but the freedom of speech and the creep of legislation and curtailment of freedoms, etc., that is obviously something that a lot of people are interested in. I'm particularly interested in, particularly with the line of work and everything else that I do. What would your main focus be with legislation? Because we obviously have lots of, the way I describe it is we have lots of overlapping legislation now that can be construed as contradictory and difficult to follow. and obviously we have ETHR. What would your priority be?
Well, I think it was Tacitus who said the more laws, the more corrupt the state. And if we just take the tax manual, which is 21,500 pages long, it's full of as many loose ends as a plate full of spaghetti. It's open to innumerable interpretation. As you know, one of the weapons the state uses against those people who challenge it is to give them a tax investigation. Now, when you have tax law that's that complex, you usually find there's some technicality upon which people have either misinterpreted or got it wrong. Not because they're tax evaders, but simply because the whole thing is so complex. And I used to do my own tax return when I was young. Now I wouldn't have a prayer of doing my own, as probably none of us would. I mean, the accountants
advice,
you
I
use,
think.
well, the accountants you use have been weaponized against us, and they tend to have the necessary software and algorithms to try and navigate these extremely complex tax formulas. So I think it's the same with the law, and I think the more laws, the more regulations, the more rules, the more what I call legal issues there are, the more opportunity there is to penalize those people who don't fall into line and behave as the state wants you to behave.
I would agree
So
with that.
that I think has meant that the sort of what I call rather weak and lightweight leaders who now infest not just Parliament but the civil service. I think a lot of our judiciary are questionable now. I think a lot of our our judges are not the same quality people as they used to be. I think there's probably a lot of devious stuff going on within the legal system. I've caught barristers lying behind privilege before, so I don't have this view that legal people are above questioning. I think they very definitely need to be questioned. But my view is that the law has become half a cut above itself, as I say, and it probably needs to be cut back down to size and reduced to sort of a sensible proportion of the country. And maybe, Daniel, I don't know what you think, but maybe AI is going to help that, because I've found now, and whereas I fought these libel trials, I didn't have access to AI. Now we have access to AI. We can actually check up on what our lawyers are doing or check up on what our accountants are doing. And at least we're able to then ask them questions and challenge whether or not they've got it right. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think look, it's been an interesting experience. I think, as they say, what doesn't kill you probably makes you stronger. And I think I've learned again from this. I don't quite know where it goes, but I'm what it has done is made me even more determined to continue with the battle which we've been fighting in Parliament, to move the debate in a sensible, common sense way, so that we start to change the way Britain's governed. And I think, whether we're talking about detain, deport, mass immigration, mass illegal immigration being dealt with, whether it's the rape gangs being dealt with, I think generally we have, by just speaking plainly, changed the way in which a lot of Parliament now views these topics. And Parliament's a bit like a shoal of fish. I think the Liberal left had been moving it in one direction, and now I think we're starting to move the shoal in a more logical direction. But probably in order to solve the problem, what we need to do is replace most of the people and get some sensible people with common sense views and actually some real life experience to help lead us into better times. A bit like Margaret Thatcher saved us from the unions having beer and sandwiches in Number 10, and a socialist sort of country which had to go to the IMF to bail itself out, which is ultimately what socialism does. Maybe we'll see some light at the end of the tunnel, which gives us a Margaret Thatcher or some other enlightened leader who's going to really be strong enough to change everything that's gone badly wrong. But we'll see. I'm going to try and play my part in that. I think that's what you share, that vision, but I tell you what, it's quite hard to fight. Yeah, it's everywhere. I had a meeting in my constituency with a school on yesterday morning before I went out on a boat with RWE, trying to get them to invest in Great Yarmouth. And I think these schools, they were saying to me, well, I said, look, I've had 10 complaints about this post you've made, which, in my view, is not right. Oh, she said, here is the guidance. This is how we're guided to do it. I said, well, do you agree with the guidance? Well, that's not the point. That is the guidance. We follow the guidance. I said, but if you don't agree with it, why don't you challenge it? Why don't you make it clear you don't agree with it? And then it might change. But we've got this, I think, malign guidance, which means once you've got that guidance, and as I said to them, your job is not to teach young people what to think, it's to teach them how to think and how to work out what's right, what's wrong, when the state is mistreating them and when the state is supporting them. You need to teach them, how to look after themselves, not teach them to become dependents.
And I think we need people to think, and we need people to challenge. And as you say, if something is wrong, it needs challenging and changing. And speaking of challenging and changing, two more things while we have a few minutes left. You can answer them either together or separately. But you hinted in your statement a couple of things about reform. So reform generally, what you might think, and you hinted at leadership for one. Secondly, we have Keir Starmer even being criticised by some of his own people and some of his own perhaps erstwhile supporters now for what they see as being a move to the right to perhaps appease people that don't support him, which is far too little and far too late. What do you think about any of that?
Well, again, what I think we've seen is the honeymoon period at the beginning of a very powerful Labour. I call it the landslip Labour election victory, because it really wasn't a landslide. If you take the percentage of the vote he won, it was really pretty thin, but it's given them a huge majority. But I think they've done some really very stupid things. So I think certainly having said they wouldn't put APR on farmland and BPR on businesses, they've done it. But I do think that as we get into the Parliament, and they're now nearly a year in from being elected, I think we will see a progressive number of MPs. I think you are beginning to see the rural MPs now arguably breaking ranks to some extent on this APR. And when you saw Steve Reed and many of his colleagues promising APR wouldn't be part of the new Labour administration, and then shortly after that they put it on, I'm not sure Labour will win very many rural seats in the next election. And the 5 golden rules of business, which is what's in it for me, means that increasingly I think rural MPs, probably red wall seat MPs, probably coastal Labour MPs, people who are likely to lose their seat at the next election, I think increasingly their instinct for being elected for another term will trump their loyalty to Keir Starmer, and you'll see the ranks start to break. But a lot of the people in the Labour Party, look, they're all, in my view, sheep. I don't think most of them don't run businesses, or they don't take risk. They don't really participate in the real economy. They're sort of, swimming around, collecting 92 grand a year and arguably having a very comfortable life where everybody gives them all the opprobrium that comes with being an MP. So I think a lot of them are followers rather than leaders, but I do think not being elected at the next election will increasingly become an issue for them, because I can see the Labour vote disappearing in the same way that the Tory vote disappeared, as progressively we see, as I've just said, the rural seats. I actually think what Rachel Reeves has done is, even though the figures today would flatter to deceive, I think she is going to destroy the British economy. I can't see people taking risk. If you take risk now and you invest and you get it right, you make money, the government takes most of it off you. If you lose money, you have to write the check for the whole lot. So, and it's increasingly difficult, as you probably know, to offset those investment costs that you lose against any other income you have, because they've put in all sorts of heffalump traps to try and ensure that you end up being defraudulently or fraudulently tax taken off you. So having most people don't necessarily understand this, but I think risk-taking is such a key element in a vibrant economy. So I think they've done their very best to damage the fabric of the entire country. And the job of the next government is to, as I say, repeal as much of the malign legislation as is necessary very early on and replace it with some better policy, which empowers the individual and neuters the state.
Absolutely. And just to round that off, I think I completely agree with you, because a long time ago, when they first got into power, and I said that I think it won't be long before people do start to break rank. There is dissension and there's infighting, people change. And then predictably, I think Keir Starmer's changed his ways. That's going to put more people off. I think it's inevitable. Will they stay the full term? I don't know. But we'll wait and see. But I'm sure a lot of people will be looking forward to hear more from you.
They'll hang on in there if they can, is the answer. So they'll hang on for dear life. I think the thing that could fell them is a serious economic decline, and I'm expecting that to happen. I mean, from the businesses which I run, we are beginning to see a severe slowdown in the economy. Now, that may not be immediately apparent because we've had some quite good weather. Actually, the GDP per capita is definitely flatlining and has done since 2019, which is almost unprecedented. So
calling it growth is disingenuous, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're in for a rocky ride, and pumping money into the state in order to try and solve the problem is not going to deliver for us. So look, I think they will hang on as long as they can, but I think we need to budget for the fact that they may not last the full term. You just don't know what could happen, either internationally or here. And with Trump doing what he's doing, we're living in very volatile times.
Indeed. Rupert, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming back, and I look forward to having you back again.
Pleasure. Well, thank you for your support. It's really appreciated. And, keep in touch, and we will keep speaking.
You too. My pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Have a good evening.